English or Chinese? I think English is better. So what I'm going to do is talk about a bunch of things, but the first thing I wanted to talk about was how expectations have changed. So the citizens now are more powerful than ever before in the history of humanity. People have, with the internet, with technology, with the connection around the world, the ability to do more than we've ever been able to do in the past. Now this change is significant. This shift in power from the institution to the individual has been a very big enabler and put a lot of pressure on governments everywhere because our citizens expect so much more now of government. So it is important for government to adapt and to become better for the citizens. And this change in expectation is a pressure, but it's also an opportunity. Because citizens are so much more powerful, they can also solve so many more problems. So one of the big challenges now and big opportunities is that we can work together more collaboratively. So governments can work with citizens, can work with companies, can work with NGOs to actually solve problems a lot more effectively than ever before. So the shift in power is important and to recognise. I work in the Australian government. I work in, but I have a background in private government. I worked in NGOs. I've done a lot of volunteer work, and I think that the shift in power is something that a lot of my colleagues in the Australian government don't really understand. They say, yeah, but we're the government, so people will work with what we can do. And they don't realise that, yeah, but people will, if you don't give them what they need, they'll just do it for themselves. So it's a very, very important shift. I think that governments struggle with it. So governments are used to being very, the top-down hierarchy, working from the top. And citizens are now able to get together and to be able to do very, very big things, not just locally, but around the world. The reason this is important is also to understand that it's not just any old citizen as well, it's also the geeks, right? How many people here are geeks? Yeah, we have a few geeks? No? How many people are technology sort of people, work with computers? A few? Okay, yeah, so you're all geeks. I think that we're seeing people who are able to not just use computers, but are able to create with technology. They're not just using it, they're actually developing it. These are the people who are creating the world, because you might have, this is a XKCD. Does anyone read XKCD? It's a great cartoon, we should all read XKCD. But it's really interesting because the traditional way of dealing with power is you have, a lot of functions, even in government, to do with power, but at the end of the day, it's a geek actually setting up the big red button that everyone presses, right? So the implementation of technology is very important because that's where you get, whether it's done right or done wrong or done for the benefit of people or done against people. I quite often like to say that you are exactly as free as the tools that you use, which is, I think, something people are still getting used to. So in Australia, we have a lot of, so I'm here specifically to talk about open data. I think open data is something that is emerging both as a response to the change in expectations to people, but it's also emerging as a response in government needing to change how it does things, in trying to make government more effective and more efficient and more transparent and making for governments to actually work better together. In Australia, we have 3 levels of government. We have national, federal, we have state, and we have local. And we have 1 national government, 8 states, and then about 500 local governments. So there's a lot of government, a lot of government. And trying to get people to work across government is very hard. So one of the things that we've started to realise is that if everyone is, if rather than trying to get everyone to collaborate all the time, you make it so that citizens are able to work with all the governments more easily. You make it so governments are able to consume each other's data, consume each other's systems, to automatically pull what they need from other governments. Then you can start to get citizen developed services and citizen-centric services. But if everyone has to have a official understanding across each government, then it just takes too long. You know, politics gets in the way of government, I like to say. So in Australia, we have a lot of open data work just in the last few years. So only 2 years ago, we had Data.gov.au and we had Data Victoria. So we had two. In just 2 years, we now have ACT, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, and Melbourne, the city of Melbourne. So we now have 5 state and territory governments, 1 national, and there's Melbourne, but there's also several other local governments starting to publish as well. And again, the same thing. So some of these states were publishing on here, and now some of them are setting up their own portals. But from a citizen's perspective, they don't care. They don't care what jurisdiction you are, they don't care what department you work for, they just want access to the data. So we're in the process now of setting up to share the metadata, the catalogue, across all of the portals so that you can search for all the data from anywhere. But that's a collaboration to make it easier for citizens. But a lot of data has started being published just in the last few years, which has been very exciting. So I'll get to how. So Data.gov.au is a CCAM website, but I can talk about technical stuff afterwards with anyone that wants to go into it. But basically, we work with lots of different types of data. We have a public data request website, so people can request data and vote it up and then comment on it, and then we go and chase publicly requested data. We have a blog that we run. We have our public statistics all available for anyone. We have tools for people to reuse the data, which is quite good. But the key is that the citizen access to data is sometimes a difficult decision for a department to make, not because they're secretive, not because they're dodgy, but because they just don't have the time or the money to actually open the data. So what we did was we started showing governments how it's in their best interest to open data. So it makes their life easier, it makes their life cheaper, it makes it, every time a journalist asks a question and they have to put time into responding to the question, if the data is already publicly available, they save time, so that's been very handy. Rather than building a new system to so that you can have an app talk to your data and you have to build the APIs manually, they put it on Data.gov.au and it's automatically available with an API. So they're finding that publishing their data publicly is making the lives of the government departments easier, which has been helpful because if they want to publish data, then the citizens will get the benefit. If they don't want to publish the data, then it's very hard to get it out. So getting them to realise it's in their best interest to publish data has been a big challenge, but they're starting now to see that it's actually to their benefit to publish data, and that's when everyone else will get the benefits. Yeah? So what I'm going to do is give you just a quick demo of Data.gov.au. All right, I'm just going to, we've got a little bit of time. I'll show you what Data.gov.au does and how it works. And then I'll keep talking about some of the philosophy and the strategy about what we've done. So Data.gov.au is just a CCAN. We've got over 5,200 data sets now, just in the federal government. And then there's about another 6,000 data sets across all of the state portals, but they'll all be searchable soon. We have, and the sort of data set, I'll come back to that. We have site statistics, which are publicly available, which are quite handy because they look at, let me see, they start to make it easy for people to identify what data sets they want to get access to and what's popular, what people want to see. It's been quite handy. We have all of our documentation publicly available, so anyone can go and have a look at, how to publish data, how it works, metadata, strategy. Even our platform architecture is publicly available, so people can see how it works. We just use, so all the documentation is publicly available if you're interested. We have an idea scale for people to request the data sets, so then we can see what is popular and what people want to see. And it's been very handy to put pressure on departments to say, well, this is a popular data set. If you open this data set, then it will be beneficial to people. And then that helps start the conversation with some of the departments. We have tools like the national map, which has been set up. The national map talks automatically to Data.gov.au, so all of the spatial data on Data.gov.au automatically comes up on a map that you can then use on a government website. So you can say, show me, and this is just, you know, again, it's open source technology, which has been very good because then we've been able to adapt it, change it as we've needed. And from a department's perspective, you know, for them to set up this infrastructure is very expensive. So if we make it available to them for free, then they want to publish the data because then it automatically turns up on the national map, and then they can use the national map on their own websites. So it saves everyone money, saves everyone time, and creates a fantastic benefit for the society and for citizens because they now have access to the data. And then we have a whole bunch of use cases that we publish as well. So some of these use cases have been very interesting. They've been, actually I can make this up. Some of the use cases, last year for the first time ever, we published data from our federal budget. Very exciting. Australia is very lucky. We have a lot of open government today. Every year, the national budget comes out publicly. Every year, every department has to report publicly. All of the politician expenses are public. All of it. There's a lot of data publicly available, and there's a lot of very good citizen initiatives like Open Australia, which actually I'll quickly show you, that make it very good, very easy to participate in our. There's been a lot of community organisations to make our democracy very transparent and open. So this website, every time a politician speaks in Parliament, it's all recorded here. So then you can subscribe for every time a politician speaks or a particular word is spoken, or any record of what decisions they make. And this is just a community organisation that has done some fantastic work. So it's been very, very good to then work with them to say, well, what data will help you with more transparency from a democracy perspective. So that's really exciting. But from a budget perspective, a lot of people in government said, I say to them, let's do some open data. And they say, okay, here's my report. I already do open data. They put a book on the table. They say, here is my open data. And then I have to say to them, that's not data. It's a book. And they say, oh, here's my PDF. No, it's not data. It's a PDF. So there's a lot of education to talk to people in government about what data is and to start them thinking about data. I had someone in a government department just 1 month ago say to me, how much money have you spent on this product? And I said, well, we already have all the contracts of government publicly available on Data.gov.au. So in 15 minutes, here's an answer of how much everyone has spent on that particular product. And they said, oh, that's very helpful. But how much has your department spent? And I said, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time and money for me to go and get you an answer from my one department, which is less accurate than the public record that's available today. So the biggest challenge that we have in Australia is getting people to move from fairly open government, because we have fairly open government today, to open digital government, to thinking about data, to thinking about technology, thinking about how you can actually use information in a digital way, not just in a book sort of way. So that's been very challenging. So publishing information, publishing data from our budget. This is the first time data was published from the budget. It has always been published in a book form, not in a data form. So it's very exciting. We made the argument that it should be published, and a lot of people in government said, yeah, okay, fine, we'll do it, but we don't think there's any benefit. What we found, and we reported it as a blog post, so you can go and get information about this, we found that it saved citizens and journalists and companies a lot of time and money, so that's good. But more importantly, from a government perspective, it saved government a lot of time and money. Because traditionally, a lot of people in government would go and report the book. They have to read the book to figure out what's going on. When they have the data, of course, they can go and figure out what's going on a lot more easily. So that gave them a motivation to say, oh, next year, as in this year, we'll do it better. So every time we do open data, we're trying to demonstrate that it creates a benefit for society, for industry, for democracy, but it also creates a benefit for government, because for the public service in particular. If the civil service sees benefit, they will want to do it, and then everyone else also gets benefit. Obviously, there will be some cases where the public want data that the civil service don't want to give, and there's going to be some tension. But getting people thinking more about data as in everyone's best interest has been a strategy that we've taken in Australia. And then these are two citizen projects. This is one of my favorite projects. It's called the openbudget.org. I'll actually show it to you. The openbudget.org is there. This is a couple of hackers who just, in the good sense of the word, obviously, who took all the data from the budget and then extracted from that data all of the expenses, all of the money that is spent, right? And they made, hold on, I'm not in a decent browser. Am I? No, I have a decent browser. Oh, it won't open. Okay. Now, all right, so you can see it up here. So on the inside circle is the portfolio, and then the department, and then the program, and then the outcome, and then the actual expense. But you can see very quickly which department is getting more money, which department is getting less money, what service is being cut, what service is being introduced. You can see very easily and intuitively how the money is being spent across the federal government. It's very, very good. And for most people outside the government, it makes life easier. But even for people inside the government, a lot of people inside government find it very hard to figure out what is going on. So getting access to the data will actually help us better understand what's going on and what is working and what is not working. I think it's a big challenge, but people are starting to see benefit. And then this project goes into a lot more detail. This is a citizen journalism project around the budget expenses. And the detail that they want, they sometimes ask for detail, and then they assume that the government doesn't want to give the detail. But actually, the government doesn't have the detail. In some cases, what's being asked for just doesn't exist. So then we get to go to the department and say, why doesn't it exist? If this detail existed, then maybe we would all get better benefit from this data. So it's an ongoing process. I believe personally that there is no such thing as a perfect open data world, because it is always continuing. When you take a step forward, then your expectation improves and life gets better, but you need to keep stepping forward. You never finish. You'll never actually be done with open data. So this is a good example. So one of our ministers, who's actually a very conservative minister, made a public announcement that he was going to publish on a quarterly basis the social service welfare payment statistics. Right? So it's not microdata, but it's the statistics of every single social welfare payment in Australia by location. Now, why is this interesting? Well, for many people it's not interesting. But what was interesting was the data was released and is being kept up to date regularly. And within 1 month, one of our major news services, our broadcasters, took the data and built a website application so people could compare the amount of money being spent on welfare in their region to another region to another region. So the government could have built a public-facing application to do that comparison, but by just publishing the data and making sure the data is made available to anyone, then everyone can go and build, analysis tools and visualization tools and comparison tools, and that works, I think, a lot better, because it means that people actually trust what's being presented. Because when you trust it more anyway. When you just publish a pretty picture, you don't know what's behind the pretty picture. If you don't have the data, then how can you trust the picture? So that's been very interesting. And then we have one of our local governments started publishing all their spatial data. So in Australia, a lot of the spatial data in the local government is sold to the state, which is sold to the federal. So there's a lot of money changing hands. When a local government just publishes data publicly, then everyone can use it for free. It creates some tension with the federal, but it's good for everybody else. So suddenly, a lot of the public access to this data was so much better, and now that one town is getting benefits that a lot of other towns are not getting, which creates competition. So then other towns says, oh, I want what they've got. And so then you start to see people wanting to do what each other are doing. I think competition is a natural weapon for improving open data, because you can always find examples that are better than where you are and say, well, why don't we just do that? Oh, why don't we just do that? And so it's been very helpful. So there's a bunch of useful case studies. I'll put these slides up so you can just click through, but we've got a bunch of case studies that we've published, and which have been very helpful. But we're, to be honest, I have a very small team for Data.gov.au, and we've been mostly focusing on publishing data. So we're in the process now of writing up some more case studies, but we prefer to, we're geeks, we prefer to do things, not to talk about things generally. So I'm actually here on holidays, which is why I thought I'd drop in and say hi. But yeah, we're in the process now of writing up more case studies. Oh, I didn't find it all. Hold on. Oh, that's a bugger. All right. Can I draw? I can't draw. All right. I want you to imagine. What we do is we have at this level data, at this level discovery, at this level value. So we're working on the knowledge that data exists in many places. We make it easy for departments to publish data on Data.gov.au, but if they want to publish data on their own websites, they can, but they must link it on Data.gov.au. And we say to them, you can't link non-data, and you must, if you can, make it available as a web service. So I won't go into details, but we've been really focused on data quality, not just numbers of data sets. I had one agency say, we can give you 100,000 data sets. I said, okay, cool. Show me the data. And when we had a look at their data, 90,000 of their data sets weren't data. They were reports, they were PDFs, they were not data. And so we said, we'll just take the data. And they said, what? Why don't you take all of it? And so educating departments about data versus non-data has been very challenging, but very good, because it means that Data.gov.au is actually data. So people can trust it and start to use it. One thing I thought might be useful to talk about is about open source. So how many people here, well, no, I'll just go straight into it. So my background is very much from the, I guess, the open source community, and with Linux, with Datos, with a few different projects. And what we found with Data.gov.au is that open source has given us a lot of benefits. I actually think that open source has been very beneficial to government very broadly. And here's some of the reasons why. It's actually improving how government does technology, generally speaking, because open source teaches you to use the best tool for the job and not just use one tool that tries to do everything and doesn't do anything well. You know this thing? So what we say is, we'll use that tool for this, that tool for this, that tool for this, and when something comes along which is better at this, then we'll switch that out and use something else. And so we find that open source for Data.gov.au gives us a lot of flexibility. It gives us the opportunity to use the best tool for the job and to extend that tool. The use of CCAN for Data.gov.au, one of the reasons we chose it is because it's open source and it gives us the flexibility to extend. So 1 month after launching Data.gov.au, we added a GeoServer. Then we added a new functionality, like we've added probably 4 or 5 new functions to CCAN because we could. But with some of the other tools out there, which I've also used, you can't add new functionality. You're locked into what you're told to use. So from my perspective, if you want to innovate in government, open source gives you a better capacity to innovate. So you get to stand on the shoulders of giants, not just locally, not just in your own IT department, but globally. It gives you great models of collaboration and competition. So departments are used to competing with each other, being very secretive. You don't tell anyone what you're doing, just in case they try to take your money. So open source teaches agencies, well, but if you're doing that and I'm doing this and it's the same, we can still compete on other things, but we can collaborate on this. And if we collaborate on this, government, generally speaking, certainly in Australia, is not going to get more money. It's not going to get more people. It has to do what it does with less money and less people every year. So if departments don't learn to collaborate, they will fail. Yeah? They have to share resources, they have to share people, they have to share technology. Otherwise, they won't be able to deliver their services. So we are under a lot of pressure to change how we do things in the Australian government, and collaboration is a key part of that strategy. And teaching people to learn to collaborate when they're used to fighting is fun. It's like having children in a sand pit, getting them in trouble, you know, but it's working, and people are starting to realise. So I'm now part of a new project in Australia, as well as Datos, looking at how to do digital transformation. And it's all part of the same thing. How do we get agencies to work together to create systems that actually will work for the citizen? Anyway, I'll come back to that. So modular and interoperable design, yes. APIs as a service, I'll come back to that. Mashable government, I love this idea. You take the technology, you take the data, you take the services, you take the APIs. If everything that government does is able to be mashed up, then we can create a service for today, a service for tomorrow, a service for 10 years from now, much more easily. But traditionally, government builds a service like this. They build every bit of the pie, or every bit of the stack, and then when they need to build a new service, they start again. They build everything from the stack. If everything is able to be shared, then you can build multiple things in many different ways, like Lego. Not the back there. Meritocracy, technical excellence. I think that in the private sector, in the startup community, people love technology. They do technology because it's fun, and they take pride in what they can build, and they love to build clever hacks. Yeah, I think in government, that pride in technology it gets worn down over many years, and so trying to recapture that fun, that exploration, that innovation, that joy in technology is a challenge. And I think that the team that work here have sort of been doing a lot of that as well. But trying to reintroduce the joy around clever technology is a challenge, but it's a really important lesson, again, to learn from open source. So Datos, I'm not going too much into this, but you can look at this anytime. But basically, we've done a lot of work. But the technical work is not the hard bit. The technical work's easy. It's all of the cultural bit, and the politics, and the teaching people what open data is, and the teaching people what the benefit to them is. So there's been a lot of, actually I'll show you one example. We have one data set in Australia called the energy rating data set. Now, every single electrical device sold in Australia, 7 million devices, has an energy rating which shows how efficient that device is, okay? So what it means is that you can say a 5-star fridge is more energy efficient than a 1-star fridge. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. That data set was never publicly available up until maybe a year ago. And then they made it. They wanted to build an app for people to compare fridges and televisions and mobile phones in the store to give more benefit for consumers to buy more energy efficient applications, not appliances. But it also puts pressure on the industry to make more energy efficient appliances. So it's a win-win, right? So when they wanted to make this application, they decided that they came and spoke to us about it, which was good. And hold on, energy rating, I can go back here. And when they wanted to build it, they told us that they had a quote to build an API to their internal data set. So the data source was in that department, and they were quoted, I don't know, $30,000 to build an API. And we said, okay, well, if we got a deal for you. You put your data on Datos, we'll help you automate it, so it updates every night, and then you automatically have an API available. And then you can build your application, your app, on top of Datos because it's a publicly available API. And by the way, if you do that, everyone else can build apps as well. And I said, cool, we just saved them a bunch of money and helped them implement it, and it worked really well. So when they did this, they found also that they suddenly had another dozen or so public applications made, which is very good. And but what they also found was, one second. So then they were so impressed by how much benefit they got out of it that they went and made a video, which I might just briefly play for you because it was very handy. But, where are they? Videos. Yeah, we go. It only takes 2 minutes, so. And he speaks more slowly than me, so it's okay. Oh, do we have sound? Yeah. Yeah, well, will we have sound in the speaker? Okay, let's try. That's okay, we can read it anyway.
We know that 97% of people will search online before they buy. 85% have a smartphone, and 1/3 use their smartphone while shopping. Many appliances cost more to power than they cost to buy. Plus, there's a huge difference in power costs between different models. The app uses the data behind the world.
This is a public servant.
Energy rates
I'm telling you.
as part of a highly successful industry and government program. The labels appear on the over 7 million appliances sold in Australia and New Zealand every year. Manufacturers provide this data and they register their appliances for sale. We publish this data on the Energy Rating website at data.gov.au, Australian government's one-stop shop for domestic housing. Making data freely available unlocks information for those who need it and creates endless opportunities for developers and industry. Uploading data onto data.gov.au automatically creates a free application programming interface, which makes the data machine readable and easier for developers to use and combine other data sets to create new apps. This interface also makes it possible for retailers to automatically and accurately update the energy rating information on their websites every 24 hours to give their customers the very latest information about their products. Data.gov.au has made it amazingly easy for partners, suppliers, and developers to collaborate and create energy rating apps to create new business opportunities, promote energy efficient appliances, and help households and businesses save money. To download the energy rating app, visit energyrating.gov.au.
So we didn't even pay them for that. It was good. But this is a department that originally we're just going to pay someone to build an app, pay someone to build an API and get no benefits. When they started publishing the data, not only did it make it cheaper for them to build their app, but every single company that sells electrical devices in Australia had access to the data that they could use to update their own databases on what the energy rating of their different applications were. So there was a benefit for developers, benefit for citizens, and benefit for companies. It was very, very useful. So we're seeing more and more of these case studies happen, which are very helpful. So, we've done a lot of work with Data.gov.au, and all of our code, by the way, for our modifications are available on our GitHub. So if you're interested in code, please go and check it out. But yeah, we're in the process of setting up some new functionality around quality, around link tables. But yeah, we've taken an iterative approach with Data.gov.au. So as we need new functionality, we build new functionality. As data publishers or data users want something new, they ask, and then if we can, we build it. So by taking a very iterative and continually improving approach, it's been very helpful in starting to get a lot of departments wanting to use it, because they used to see open data as a pain, just annoying, something you had to do when someone asked you for something, but now they're starting to see it as beneficial. Okay, so everyone knows about sort of the benefits to the community. There's the economic benefits, there's transparency benefits, there's the improvement to how government serves people, these kind of things. People talk a lot about the key benefits to community. I thought I'd focus a little bit on, and hopefully you'll understand why, because the benefits to community, everyone can agree on, but it's very hard to get people to focus their time and money on doing it if it doesn't actually also help them. So the benefits to the public service end up being around improving how they can deliver services, their efficiencies, their policy, the opportunity to collaborate. A lot of departments are not used to collaborating with other departments or the public, or industry, or anyone. Even in the one department, they don't collaborate. This is crazy. But starting to get them to think about collaboration has been very, very helpful. And open data is really helping with some of that collaboration. And it gives me the opportunity to improve the quality of data. A lot of departments will say, we can't open the data because it's not completely accurate. And you say, that's okay, just put it out and just say, this is not completely accurate, and then people will help you. When we release the contract data, we release 15 years of all the contracts in the Australian government as a data set. And a couple of geeks picked it up and fixed it. And they came back with, for the Department of Defence in Australia, have a guess how many different spellings there were for that one department name. Does anyone want to guess? Keep going. Like way up. Keep going. No, keep going. Crazy, go crazy. Oh, no, not millions. But yeah, 280. So there were 280 different spellings of the one department. Right. And so we said, okay, that's a data improvement. So we took the updated data and we put it back into the data set. And it was great. So it makes analysis easier. But the public want to do this. We've got a lot of guidance online, so you can check that out. There are a lot of challenges. Here is my key lesson, though. If someone, anyone, whether it's a department or a person or a company or anyone, if someone wants to do something, they can deal with all the challenges. If they don't want to do something, there are always challenges. So the lesson was to teach people how to want to do it. Because when they wanted to do it, everything else was able to be dealt with. So even some of the legislation challenges in Australia, some of our departments have legislation that says, okay, no. The legislation says, oh, in that case, the legislation says that you cannot do something very specific. But it's up to the interpretation, right? So if they say, well, actually, maybe we can interpret it in a different way, or maybe we can change the legislation. You know, there are always ways to fix a problem if you want to fix a problem. So the first challenge was to win the hearts and minds of some of the people that we deal with. As you would all know, there's a lot of confusion between open data and big data. So, I tend to try to educate people about, you know, even big data requires small data. So you can't get all the benefits of big data unless you start focusing on all the data that you have. So it's about working with some of our people to look at what they have and not just jumping straight into, you know, what can we do with big data, because it doesn't mean anything. Like a lot of people that talk about big data are just on the current bandwagon. Yeah, it's like cloud. It's like, you know, everything is so hyped up. Anyway, so this is something I want to focus on. Open by design. Once you start people focusing on open data, why do open data? Okay, and then they start saying, well, our system doesn't do that. And we say, okay, that's okay. The software you have doesn't do it, but the software talks to a database. And we can talk to the database. There's always a way to get data out of a system, always. And it's always easier than you think. So educating has been good, but starting to look at all future systems, all new systems, all procurement. And we don't have this yet in Australia. This is where we're trying to get to, is by saying every new system that is built should build open by design into the system. Should be built on an API architecture. Should be built on, if there's data generated by the system, how to make that data publicly available automatically. Looking at how the records management, looking at analysis tools and visualization tools as part of the stack. So really starting to work with agencies once they get it and once they start to see the benefits of open data to say, okay, well, why don't you start thinking about your technology strategy, how to build this into your future systems to make it easier for you to use your data, which also happily makes it easier for everyone else to use their data. Right? So really starting to change the culture moving forward. Which brings us to the concept of governance and API. This is my current passion. I think if we can make the systems and the data and the processes of government more consumable and mashable, then, and I don't know if you've all seen this movie, but then we can make spaceships. It's kind of like people talk about wanting to build new solutions to do something. I sort of say, well, but we don't know what all of the Lego pieces are. If you don't know what pieces you have, you can't build something. And if every piece is a different standard and a different shape and doesn't fit together, you can't do anything. Open data gives us the Lego, yeah? It doesn't give us a spaceship, but it gives us the means to build a spaceship, or the pirate ship, or whatever you want. So open data is a foundation for solving the problems of today and into the future. And I think seeing open data as Lego is a very handy way of trying to figure out how to think about government data, not just as a product of government services, but as an asset that everyone else can build upon, as oil, as a beneficial thing for the society. So GovHack, GovHack is an independent event. It is not run by government at all. It's run by volunteers. It is Australia's biggest hackathon. So last year we had 1,300 developers in 11 cities, working with government data to build all kinds of cool stuff, to build hundreds and hundreds of new ideas. Some of those ideas go on to become, commercialized. Some of those ideas go on to become, just community projects. Some of those ideas don't go anywhere, but that's okay because it develops collaboration. It shows how people can use data. You should see some people in government, they go to GovHack and their brains explode because they have a perspective that says that innovation is something that you spend $4 million with IBM and it takes 10 years. Whereas innovation is a pretty stupid word, isn't it? It's become a buzzword, but it's become a word that a lot of people don't use. GovHack is about reclaiming the word innovation. Real innovation is about doing something. It's about doing something cool, right? It's about solving a problem in a tricky, interesting new way. It's about working across different disciplines to figure out new ways of doing stuff. So what we're really trying to do is to retake innovation, to show how clever our geeks are in Australia, and to help encourage government to open more data, to work with the community, and to actually realise the benefit of their data. It's been very successful. I've had a lot of, today in GovHack, because I have a national team of volunteers, and I do this in my spare time. I'm not paid to do this, and it's not my job. We have a national team of volunteers, and then we have a local team in every city. So the national team basically works with all the national government and says, you've got all these developers. Why, what data do you have access to? How can people use it? And I've had a lot of departments say that GovHack is the reason that they've started to do more open data, because they had a reason to do open data. It wasn't just reactive or because they had to or because it's a policy. They got actual benefits from open data. I suggest having a look at the open data website if you have any time. Sorry, the GovHack website. This year, for the first time, we're doing international. So we're doing Australia and New Zealand. We haven't gone global yet because it's a big step. But we're probably going to get 2,500 developers this year, all participating from private sector, public sector, schools, universities, all over the place. It's really fun. And part of GovHack, which has been really important, is we have a red carpet event. And it's great because you have the hackathon. You have your 48 hours to build something cool. But then a month later, we have a red carpet event where we have some representatives, because you can't put 1,500 people into a red carpet event. It's very, very hard to do. So we invite people from each location to represent their teams, to come to the red carpets, to dress up. It's the best dressed lot of geeks you've ever seen. And to actually walk on the red carpet and accept their awards. And I had some people say that it's kind of like the X factor for geeks. It's cool. So, but again, it's about not just doing something because we love it. It's about showing off and about increasing the general public awareness of data, of geeks, of technical, the opportunity of technology to improve our society. Yeah, because at the end of the day, we are the people who are actually pioneers for our generation. Because we are the people who are actually creating the future in what we do. And if we don't take that seriously, then other people with the same skills will take it seriously and they may not have the same perspective that we have. Yeah, so it's very important for us to see ourselves as the pioneers. So GovHack's cool and GovHack's fun, and oh, sorry, and yeah, we even had medals. It was pretty fun. Like people really got into it. So I'm going to actually finish the talk. So I think I talked too much. But I just want to leave you with 4 challenges for you. Now, does anyone here read William Gibson? William Gibson? Ah, you must read. There we go. Everyone should read William Gibson. It's very good. I like my science fiction. He has a saying that he said, which is the future is here. It's just not widely distributed. I like to say the future is here, and it is already widely distributed. So I sort of disagree slightly. But the point is, governments around the world, certainly in Australia, they're having to learn how to be part of our world. Because the internet world, the world of the technology today, no one is in charge. No one is the boss. Everyone's just one node in a big network of nodes. The governments are learning to become part of that community. And it's a challenge for them. And I think society needs to help governments be part of that. And keeping in mind that we've always got to separate out the politics from the public service. There's so many different parts of this puzzle. But so 4 challenges: learn to collaborate, and pulling people along for the journey. Design the future. Don't just be users of technology. Actually create the technology and create the future. Be part of that, creation of where we're going. Lead the way and have fun. So if it wasn't fun, we couldn't do it, right? We'd go and do something else. There's many ways to spend our time, but a lot of us love to do this stuff because it's fun. And there's a lot of stuff happening in Australia right now around data, around digital government, around open government. So if you're interested in this stuff, I encourage you to just follow us on Twitter, follow us online. There's I have a lot of essays about digital government and digital citizenship that might be of interest. But yeah, but basically have fun, go out and conquer. Yeah. Thank you very much. Questions?
I have one question. Not a question, but an observation relating the different kinds of countries you come from and what government means in Australia, what it means here, citizenship, and of course state, which is the other big issue. It's the word you haven't meant. I haven't heard. The state, which is not the government.
Oh, so okay, yeah, I understand.
So it's not the administration, but
yeah, the political versus the administration.
It's difficult probably to think, but it's a democracy issue. And like, if you don't vote, what the people you elect are not having the active representation of matters on the agenda. They can't even figure them out.
See, and this is
something else. And on the other hand, empowering people really have the data, and you have to work a lot. And I would just put a very small example relating health in Argentina. Abortion is illegal, but we found out through the national census, the pyramid. I mean, when you see the population pyramid, you find out, it's very easy to find out how many illegal abortions are happening.
I see.
So we had to go forward with that information, and it was very conflicting. And it was a very interesting example of how open data, when we start talking to the women who had gone through the procedure and starting talking out and speaking out and finding out there's a whole bunch of information related with money, with private practice, with what it's the meaning of not having public abortion,
So,
safe, and
so what, I want to make just a couple of comments.
because I mean politics.
Yeah.
What I want to mean, data has no sense at all if you are not capable of
That's right.
learning from it.
No, that's right. That's right.
And that's a bunch of.
It's just stuff unless you do something with it. Totally. I'll make a couple of comments to respond to your comment. The first one is, and this is my personal opinion. This is not representing the Australian government.
I'm not representing the
Okay, cool.
we are even.
My personal opinion is that many citizens are global citizens now. They see themselves as part of a community which is not limited by the artificial barriers for their states. Yeah? Which I think is a very interesting change in the mentality. And so what's happening is, because you can see what's happening around the world, even if you're, or ours too, even if your media or your politicians or your education gives you one view, you can still see other views. And this is new. This is very, but it's new. This is not, in the history of humans, this has not been the case. So what's happening is people see what's happening elsewhere, and then they start to change their expectation. And then it goes like, I'm an optimist, and I'm told I'm possibly too optimist, but I actually think everything goes up. It'll be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There will always be steps back. I see in Australia that some things are asked for that, and are told no, and then people get crazy. And sometimes for good reasons, sometimes not for good reasons. There's always evolution happening. You never stop, you never stay. I think that the technology gives us better opportunity to create data, even if it's not given to us, because we can observe it, we can monitor. Citizens now are able to monitor their governments like never before. All right? Because we can use the data, we can use the reporting, we can say, well, you put this report out, which comes into that report, which is both intimidating but also healthy. But it will create some conflict, I think. I'm not going to comment on Argentinian politics because I don't know. I don't know the situation here. It's not my place to do so. But the comment that I will make is that I think people will struggle from the top who are not used to having such empowered citizens, and the citizens will continue to be able to do stuff they've never been able to do before. But I agree, data without translation or without, is just data. Yeah. But there will always be people motivated to find the data and to try to use it to improve their life. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's fun because I come from humanities, from scientific humanities, epistemology, and all that sort of things.
Yeah.
And I have a son who's an engineer.
Yes.
And he's in
that's a good combination.
And nowadays we sit down and just talk about public issues and different perspectives.
But this is why you need to
and it's very interesting because I said, well, we call someone coming from geography just to look at the pyramid. And they said, well, there are so many abortions in Argentina. But how come it's not legal?
Yeah. But I mean, this is the thing.
So it was that explanation is needed because I think it's a very different starting point in Australia than here.
I think that there's some similarities and some differences, but the point is to not let anything stop you. We just keep moving. And I think using the example, the international community is very helpful to create local pressure. Right? So when New Zealand is a very good example of quite often they will make a choice which is a bit more independent than Australia. Australia, unfortunately, follows the lead too much sometimes. And so we say, well, why not take the example of New Zealand? They're more independent. They take their own path. And so everyone around the world can use other countries as an example to help create more reason to make changes locally, I think. But the cross-discipline approach is what's key there. Getting people with the different skills to work together to say, we can see that this is the outcome. So let's go and do something with that. Whereas I think in the past you'd say, well, we just don't have the information. We have no way of getting the information, so we don't even know that there's a problem, so we'll just look at something else. So I have no answers for you, sorry.
No, I mean, it's just sharing.
Yeah, for sure. That was very interesting, very interesting. But I think every country has, my observation is that every country has pros and cons. So the US is a good example where they have a very strong open data agenda. But you go to but they had a big problem where they focused a lot on the number of data sets.
Yeah.
Yep. And then some of their departments, and there was one example where one department had a very big data set, they broke it into 30,000 files, many files, and then set up to upload 100 a day. And they said, see, we do open data.
The United States or Great Britain or big countries in the developed world have very difficult problems with the open data for academic papers.
Now we get
That's
to
a
admin.
very interesting issue.
It is. So in Australia, part of the problem is there's actually some work happening. So academic papers usually want the administrative data, the microdata, which is a huge, and in Australia there's a big debate right now. The academics want public access to the microdata, but the microdata has privacy issues, major privacy issues, right? And the academics say, it's okay if someone abuses it, we just use the law. And we're like, no. So we're trying to make it easier for academics to access the data in a secure way, but then to make the aggregate version of the microdata publicly available. So then the public can use the aggregate information and the academic sector can use the microdata. So we're actually working on some stuff right now. I can chat to you afterwards about it if you like, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
And also we have here.
Sorry. What else?
Are you training students in formal education to use this data, negative or whatever?
Yeah. So there's a lot of schools that are starting to use the data and to teach application development and web development and these things in schools. It's not the formal curriculum right now for the school. In university, we now have a lot of data scientist style degrees. So but we've only had them for maybe 2 years. So we're starting to see a lot of university students starting to come out.
Only university.
Only university. But at the school level, some schools are picking it up, some schools aren't. It's not a major curriculum, but there has been certainly an increase in interest, which is good. But it's the same problem. In Australia, for many years, technology has been taught as a consumer thing. So you learn how to create a PowerPoint presentation. You don't learn how to create, the Google of tomorrow. So there's been a lot of us putting pressure on the government to say everyone should learn to program. Well, it's a basic skill. And if you learn to program, then I'm very passionate about this too. If you learn to program, even if it's just one line of code, you learn that technology will do what you want it to do. When you don't learn to program, you assume that you can only do what the technology lets you do. See? And so teaching people to shape the world rather than to be shaped by the world is a very different perspective. And we do not have enough focus of that in Australia yet. It's frustrating, very frustrating, but we're starting to change this field. And what's happening is that children at school, in schools that teach technology to create, are doing very well. So that starts to put the pressure on other schools. But we have a lot of work to do.
Here.
Sorry, Mike.
Do you have a lot of information?
Do we have a lot of information?
Do you have a lot of information? Do you use those information for data mining?
For data mining. So this is where we get into different sorts of data. So a lot of the data that's on data.au at the moment is aggregate data. So it's in aggregate. There's a lot of spatial data. There's a lot of reporting data. There's a lot of budget data. And so it's used at a very high level of data mining, but not deep admin data. Because the data mining, there are big data projects, like genuine big data projects in government, and they tend to fall into two categories. Right? One category is about using the data available to encourage people to use digital services. So if you can have a feedback loop on your websites and on your applications and on your digital data, you can say, well, we know that 80% of people started this transaction, but they stopped. Why did they stop? At which point? And they can use that to improve the service to get more people to do digital services. Yeah. So one is for nudging. The other big data projects, of course, are the intelligence, yeah? And who knows what they're doing. But in terms of bigger, I think actually most of the data mining actually happens in the academic community, because they get access to the administrative data and they do the data mining for research purposes. So across government, I think a lot of people assume government is very nefarious, but actually government's not very organized.
But it's important.
It is important, but it's not that organized. They compete. They don't collaborate. So starting as we get to more
But you have
collaboration.
information, so you can.
Oh, I know.
What?
But what happens is one department says to another department, well, usually they don't even ask. Usually they don't even look outside their department. Right? But if they know that the data exists, they go to the department and they say, hello, can I have your data? And they say no. They go, okay, I'll go make my own. So then you have lots and lots of open data is actually starting to create a greater possibility for agencies to use each other's data better. Yeah? But not necessarily. The data mining tends to usually be talking about a lower level of private data. And that data shouldn't be publicly available necessarily. Like a lot of it shouldn't be publicly available. So in aggregate, yes, but not. You don't want people to have their data used against them in the public. So anyway, but yeah, there's a lot of projects going on. Very interesting.
I have a more mundane question. Has to do with the technology.
Sure.
What do you use to upload, to import into SICAN from the databases of different departments?
I love the technical questions. It's not mundane at all. So it depends on the department. In some departments, we are working with a data custodian who is not very technical, right? In the cases where they are not technical, we just get them to use the CCAN web interface to upload stuff. In the cases where they have some technical, or where they want to upload data on a nightly basis or regular, then we either give them code, so we develop some code for them to just upload it. It's usually just a Python script or whatever is easy, or PHP or whatever. Or we show them how to use the CCAN API, because the CCAN has an API for publishing data as well. So we give them code to actually publish data. In some cases, their data is in a database that it can't just push data automatically in any way. So we use a lot of data transformation tools as well. So we use, there's an open source tool called Kettle, which is too bad. But we also use a lot of, do you know FME?
No.
FME is a tool. It's not cheap, but it's a tool, it's like a big, giant scientific calculator. You can pull from anything. You can say, okay, I want to pull from a database or a file or from an API, or I want to pull from one place or from 20 places. Okay, now I've pulled in this stuff here. Now I'm going to only take these records. I'm going to add a new column, which is the addition of these columns. I'm going to remove these records that are not complete. I'm going to mash it together. I'm going to create something, and I'm going to push it. I'm going to push it out to a file or to an API or to a database.
And that could be made automatically, regularly.
Yeah. So then you can set it up and say, okay, push it every night. Right?
What is the name of the...
This one's called FME. So FME is proprietary, but there's an open source tool called Kettle, which does a similar thing. Kettle is part of the Kentaro business intelligence tool, which is open source business intelligence tool. But a lot of the agencies we work with use FME already. It's actually a spatial data tool, but so a lot of people who deal with spatial data use it all the time. And then we picked it up to use it for some spatial data, and then we realized actually it can be used for any data. It's a really cool tool, but no one in the spatial world uses it for non-spatial data. It's crazy. Anyway, here it is up here. FME. Yeah. Hi. So is that
Yeah.
Okay. There's also, if you look at our at the site, there's information for developers, and there's information on our GitHub with some of the stuff that we've built. So yeah, just check it out. And if you have any questions,
Over there.
yeah,
Steal it.
yeah, please. It's not stealing. It's reusing.
Okay.
And we encourage that, please. And if you make improvements, contribute that.
Yeah, I would like to know if you
working with open data with
Open data?
data sets. Yes, on the government because we are facing a project to open the scientific
Cool.
use by the scientific.
I'm going to show you. So we,
and that's one question, how you work with that. And the other question is how to face the challenge to explain the scientific work that the data, the primary set of data, are going to keep safe and secure after to upload and be open. Because they are very scared of the scientific findings.
So the scientific community, the academic community are very interesting to work with, right? They want everything and they don't want to give anything back. No,
it's not true.
no, it's a joke. It's a
We have to pay for it.
No. Yeah.
To read ourselves.
Yeah. No, I understand. What I see, academics are mostly motivated by papers, right? They want to get the research and make a paper. So the data that they create in the research often enough has no value. And so publishing that data is not, there's no motivation to do so. So in Australia, a new policy was created about 2 years ago, which said, if anyone wants to get funding from the Australian Research Council, which is the primary research body, they must publish the data from their research. So you can create your own research.
How did you make them do it?
No, they haven't, they're only starting to do it now. But in this case, if they want the funding, they must agree to publish it. So it's a funding mechanism, yeah? Now, in terms of how to publish it, the ARC have not created the way to publish it yet, but they're talking...
that phase now.
I'm getting there. So some scientific data is already publicly available. There's a lot of the geoscience, there's a lot of data. So this project here, you'll be very interested in. This is a project called the National Computational Institute, I think. And these guys have provided high-powered computing infrastructure for the scientific community to publish data. They have petabytes of data, right, of scientific data. It's very cool. Again, getting away from, so the the humanities data that academics want tends to be microdata about the population. Very tricky, very complicated. We're coming up with ways of doing it better, but today there is a way to get access to that data, but it's tricky. The earth sciences data is a lot easier to make publicly available because there's no privacy issue, right? So the hydrological data, the earth data, the geology data, all these kinds of things are being made available. We have 40 years of satellite images of all of Australia available publicly now. So we have a lot of that kind of science data is being made available. In fact, we even have a lot of science data outside of the humanities science data being available. Humanities science data is only starting to now be published because of the new policy around funding, right? And even then, it'll only be published in aggregate form because you can't publish the microdata for privacy reasons. Yes? But it's been very interesting because we've got, because of the government focus on open data, it has created more opportunity for academics to say, oh, you do open data, we want more data. So it's good, it's very, very good because it creates a conversation to say, well, how does it work now? And it's really awful now. Sometimes it might take 1 or 2 years to get access to the data, and it's very expensive. And then once you've got it, it's already out of date, and then it takes another 2 years to do the research, and so the outcome is 3 years after, right? Our census actually runs every 4 or 5 years now. They're looking at doing it every 10 years, which is going to be awful for research purposes. But yeah, there's a lot more focus on science data now, but it's been a challenge because so we have a website called I think. So ANDS is a national data index. So this organization about 10 years ago started working with all the universities and research organizations They do not publish data at all, but they publish an index of data. So you can't get access to most of their data publicly, but at least you know it exists and you can go and look for it and you can make a request. So it was a big step forward for the academic community in Australia to start registering and describing and creating metadata about their data collections for discovery. So this project is worth looking at. It's very good. Now taking them from a public repository of data to a public index of data to public repository data is another step, but we're working with them on that. And they've done some good work. See, the academics want to citation, yeah? So you've got to make your data able to be cited. Yeah, that's very important. Sorry about the joke before, I didn't mean to cause offense.
No, but one more question.
Okay. I can just speak faster.
How the government decide what data is open will be open?
How does the government decide? So first of all, it's a public service, not the government, right? Yeah, so it's generally, government does not know what all data is in government. We have no idea. Right? It is impossible to know what all the data sources are because most departments don't even know all the data that they have, right? So today, the way that we focus on data to publish is in a couple of ways. The first one is we say to agencies, hey, DataGov.eu is free, you can publish data, we can help you, what do you want to publish? So agencies will focus on what they want to publish for their purposes, for their reasons. And in some cases, that's been good. The second one is our public data request site. So when people request the data, we have an obligation, because we own the policy, to go to the agencies and say, someone has requested your data, here is the request, 100 people have voted for it, the policy says you must expedite that data, so you have two options. You can either publish it, and by the way, we can help you with that, or you can choose to not publish it, but you must make an answer publicly as to why. So we had one, oh, it's really bad actually, it's good and bad. We had one agency who has a map of, that they had in a PDF, and it was a map of different areas of Australia from a cultural perspective. And they were asked for the data behind the PDF. And they said, no, we own the intellectual property, it's our right to own it, we don't need to give it to anyone. And we said, okay, that's cool, but you need to give that answer publicly. They said, sure, we'll tell everybody, it's our data, we don't care. So we said, okay. So they put the answer up, and within 1 hour, someone had gone and done a hacked the PDF to create a data form. And they got furious. And we said, this is what happens. If you want to be the source of truth, you need to put your data out there. Otherwise, people will use a different source of truth. In Australia, we have one of the best preserved copies of Magna Carta in the world. Magna Carta is important to our democracy, right? And so the people who take care of Magna Carta, I made a request for the data. And they said, I will give you a low resolution copy. I said, no, I want a high resolution. And we argue, and they say, oh, we can't release it in case people make postcards of it. I'm like, I think the Magna Carta is out of copyright. Yeah, it's like 600 years old. And they said, oh, well, we own the copyright. So I lost that fight. It was a few years ago now, but anyway. So they want to publish data, they publish, they get pressure from public requests for data. There is also a government agenda where we have identified high-value data sets, and we work with those departments to publish the high-value data sets. And then I think the final one is GovHack. GovHack has been very helpful to encourage agencies to get people to use their data, so that's been very helpful too. Those are probably the 4 most important ways that we're getting data published. But the key thing is that shifting into the concept of open by default. If you focus on which data set to publish, you're always looking backwards. If you build your system so they publish data by default, then you can start to look forward. Yeah, so that's the big cultural shift that will take us years, but that's what we're trying to do. Okay, I hope that's been useful. I hope it's not been too boring or too fast. I'm online. Please feel free to drop me any contact.